Welcome to Future Trends, where we examine the latest stories reshaping tomorrow's international dynamics. This week's headlines: CCP replaces 11 members amid corruption purge, Milei's far-right party wins Argentina's midterm elections, protests after world's oldest ruler re-elected in Cameroon, RSF claims capture of Sudan army headquarters in Fasher, OpenAI launches Chrome browser rival, and mosquitoes found in Iceland for first time. Starting with politics, Chinese Communist Party replaces 11 members amid corruption purge. It marks the highest Central Committee turnover since 2017. An anti-corruption leader in China's military was promoted to the number 2 general position. He replaces the ousted He Weidong, thought to have been a close military confidant of Chairman Xi. Milei's far-right party wins Argentina's midterm elections. The election victory for the party of Argentina's far-right president came after a campaign in which the US president announced a $40 billion bailout for the country and made continued aid, conditional on Milei's party, La Libertad Avanza, winning in an election widely seen as a de facto referendum on the self-styled anarcho-capitalists nearly 2 years in power. Ivory Coast president secures 4th term in landslide. President Ouattara secured a 4th term with a commanding re-election win, an outcome that was largely expected after his strongest opponents were deemed ineligible. The 83-year-old former international banker won 89.77% of the vote, his 3rd consecutive decisive victory after the much closer election that brought him to power in 2011. Protests after world's oldest ruler re-elected in Cameroon. President Biya, the world's oldest serving ruler, secured an 8th term in office, triggering clashes between security forces and opposition supporters who say the vote was rigged. Backers of opposition candidate Bakari, armed with sticks and stones, blocked off roads with debris and burning tires in the Central African country's commercial capital Douala. Anti-establishment candidate wins Irish presidency. Independent left-wing politician Catherine Connolly has been elected Ireland's 10th president, a largely ceremonial role, after a landslide victory over her rival Heather Humphreys. Connolly had the support of Ireland's major left-wing opposition parties, including Sinn Féin, the Irish Labour Party and the Social Democrats. Moving to stories in conflict, RSF claims capture of Sudan Army headquarters in Fasher. The paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, which have been fighting the Sudanese army for control of the country since 2023, said it has captured the army headquarters in the besieged city of Fasher in the Darfur region. This would mark a turnaround in the civil war, as the loss of Fasher would mean the loss of the only foothold of the armed forces in the Darfur region, a stronghold for the RSF. Hamas says it will disarm, but only if Palestinian state promised. While Hamas states that it does not want to govern Gaza in the future, it has quickly re-established de facto control of much of Gaza since the recent ceasefire, sending fighters back onto the streets. Hamas has not agreed to disarm, and the ceasefire it signed only stipulates the conditions of the hostage release and prisoner exchange. A spokesman said it would disarm if there was a political solution that led to the establishment of a Palestinian state. Myanmar's army taking back territory with airstrikes, China help. Fragmented opposition forces, including ethnic armies and local people's defense forces, have struggled to mount effective resistance amid internal divisions, supply shortages, and Chinese pressure. While the junta consolidates control over key towns, resistance remains resilient in Rakhine and Chin states. Morocco, more than 1,500 prosecutions after Gen Z protests. An estimated 1,000 people are currently detained, reportedly accused of having committed a variety of acts, ranging from destruction of public property to organizing unauthorized protests or violence against security forces. The Moroccan king has announced that social reforms would be sped up, and the government pledged to spend $15 billion on the 2026 budget to improve access to healthcare and education. U.S. strikes 8th alleged drug-carrying boat. The attack in the eastern Pacific Ocean was a departure from the 7 previous U.S. strikes that had targeted vessels in the Caribbean. The U.S. government said the latest strike killed 2 people, bringing the death toll to at least 34 from attacks that began last month. Now for the latest in economics. Egypt and EU hold first-ever summit. Egyptian President El-Sisi's historic meeting with European leaders focused on security, trade, migration, and regional stability, particularly the ongoing crisis in Gaza. For the EU, Egypt is a pivotal partner in ensuring stability along its southern borders. For Cairo, closer ties with Brussels offer vital economic lifelines and diplomatic support as the country navigates regional crises. Japan's imports grow in September despite tariffs. Japan's exports grew 4.2% in September on robust shipments to Asia that offset a decline in exports to the US, which were impacted by US tariffs. Japan's exports to Asia jumped 9.2% last month compared to the same period a year earlier. Exports to the US dropped 13.3%, marking the 6th straight month of on-year declines, while those to China rose 5.8% compared to last year. World Bank estimates $216 billion needed to rebuild Syria after civil war. Despite re-establishing diplomatic relations with the West and signing investment deals worth billions of dollars with Gulf countries since the Assad regime was ousted, the country is still struggling financially. The World Bank estimates that rebuilding infrastructure will cost $82 billion. The cost of damages for residential buildings at $75 billion and $59 billion for non-residential structures. Amazon targets up to 30,000 job cuts. The cuts will be focused on corporate jobs as the company pares expenses and compensates for overhiring during the peak demand of the pandemic. The figure represents a small percentage of Amazon's 1.55 million total employees, but is nearly 10% of its roughly 350,000 corporate employees. This would mark Amazon's largest job cuts since 2022. OpenAI launches browser to rival Google Chrome. The US artificial intelligence company said its own web browser, Atlas, would rival Google's popular Chrome browser. Atlas will be powered by OpenAI's popular chatbot ChatGPT, with a key Atlas feature its so-called agent mode, which effectively surfs the internet automatically on the user's behalf, predicting what sort of information they are likely to be looking for based on their browsing history. Now for news and development. ICJ rules. Israel must allow aid groups Gaza access. It found unanimously that Israel must ensure Palestinians were adequately supplied with the essentials of daily life, and that Gazans had been lacking those things during the war. It also found Israel could not unilaterally decide to shut down the UN Relief and Works Agency, the lead agency delivering aid in Gaza, or impede any other UN agencies. Israel has rejected the decision as an attempt to impose political measures and said the agency was infested with terror activities. Global use of coal hit record high in 2024. The share of coal in electricity generation dropped as renewable energy rose sharply. But the general increase in power demand meant that more coal was used overall, according to the annual State of Climate Action report. Sustainability to shape the EU's first-ever tourism strategy. With Europe facing record visitor numbers and rising climate risks, the plan aims to balance economic growth with environmental protection and community well-being. The EU said sustainability will be the guiding principle behind its inaugural tourism strategy. Plans to open Alaskan Wildlife Refuge for drilling. The US government has finalized plans to allow oil and gas drilling in a national wildlife refuge spanning pristine indigenous land in Alaska, reigniting long-simmering tensions about conserving the area. Resource exploration would be undertaken on the coastal plain of Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which sits on traditional Inupiaq and Gwich'in indigenous land. US deploys 9,000-ton destroyer close to Venezuela. The Navy destroyer, which can control airspace and track submarines, and a contingent of US Marines have arrived in Trinidad and Tobago amid rising tensions with Venezuela. The forces have reportedly been deployed to hold joint drills with local forces. Finally, our social news: 80-million-year-old fossil of marine crocodile with needle-sharp teeth found. Fossilized remains of a long-snouted crocodile-like reptile have been uncovered in Egypt's western desert. It was a 3.5 to 4 meter long reptile with a long snout and sharp teeth. As compared to modern crocodiles, the Dinosaurids were masters of coastal and marine environments. Artificial intelligence led to errors in court rulings. 2 US federal judges admitted that members of their staff used artificial intelligence to help prepare recent court orders that contained multiple errors. Lawyers have also increasingly faced scrutiny from judges across the country for apparent misuse of AI. Judges have levied fines or other sanctions in dozens of cases over the past few years after lawyers failed to vet the output the technology generated. India's Picasso is breaking auction records and upsetting Hindu right. M.F. Hussain is one of 20th century India's most important artists, 15 years after his death. One of his works recently sold for $13.75 million in New York, almost double the previous record. However, Hindu nationalists claim he desecrates religious figures, and a Delhi court recently ordered the seizure of 2 of his paintings because they were considered offensive, while exhibitions in India need police protection. Mosquitoes found in Iceland for first time after record heat. Iceland was one of only 2 mosquito-free havens in the world prior to the discovery, partly due to its cold climate, but has experienced a record-breaking heat in spring. The only other recorded mosquito-free zone is Antarctica. Africa has unlimited solar potential. Globally, more than 660 million people still lack access to electricity, and 85% of them reside in sub-Saharan Africa. Made up of 54 countries, Africa gets more sunshine hours than any other continent. It has some of the highest levels of solar irradiance, the power of the sun per square meter, in the world, with us almost unlimited potential for solar energy, according to the African Development Bank. That's your Future Trends update for this week. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with more stories reshaping our world.